The silence started with a notification I wasn't supposed to see. Ashley's phone lit up on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower, and for half a second, before the screen went dark again, I caught a preview from a number saved only as Cabana 12. It said something about splitting the deposit before Friday. When I asked her about it later, she barely looked up from her suitcase. She said it was the travel agent handling the group villa for Chelsea's bachelorette trip to Tulum. Some clerical mix-up with the booking software double-charging her card. I believed her, mostly because I wanted to. 6 years of marriage teaches you to choose the version of the story that lets you keep sleeping at night, and I chose it easily, the way you choose the lane that doesn't have traffic. I should have known sooner. Looking back now, the signs weren't subtle. I just refused to read them as a sentence instead of scattered words. 3 weeks before the trip, Ashley switched her phone passcode and didn't tell me the new one. Said she kept forgetting it herself when I asked. She bought a red bikini and hid it in the garage behind the paint cans instead of the dresser we shared. And when I found it by accident looking for a drop cloth, she laughed it off as a surprise for me. Something she wanted me to discover later, though later never came. She picked up an international SIM card 2 weeks before departure and told me it was for emergencies, in case the villa's Wi-Fi failed and she needed to check in with work, except she worked in regional marketing for a mattress company and had never once needed emergency roaming in 4 years of business trips. She stopped wearing her wedding ring around the house, said her fingers had been swelling in the heat, and slid it into a jewelry box she kept locked. Every one of these things on its own was nothing. Together, they were a woman quietly disassembling a marriage one small lie at a time and hoping I was too tired to notice the parts going missing. The morning she left for the airport, she kissed my forehead and told me to enjoy the peace and quiet, said she'd be unreachable most of the trip because she wanted a real digital detox with the girls. No phones at the pool, no work emails, nothing. I drove her to the airport myself, carried her bag to the curb, watched her disappear through security with her sunglasses pushed up into her hair like she already belonged to somewhere else. I told myself this was healthy, that women needed trips with their friends, that jealousy was an ugly, small thing I refused to become. I went home, cleaned the house, texted her a stupid meme about margaritas and got nothing back. Digital detox, I reminded myself. She warned me. Except by the second night, I noticed I couldn't see her Instagram stories anymore. Not that they weren't posting. The little ring around her profile picture kept lighting up new content. But when I tapped it, nothing loaded, just a blank gray circle where a story should have played. I assumed it was a glitch until I asked her friend Chelsea's boyfriend, Marcus, who was staying home that weekend too, whether he could see anything from the girls' trip. He said yes, plenty, dancing videos, poolside selfies, a whole highlight reel. I asked him to send me a few. When they came through, I understood. Ashley had specifically blocked me. Not logged out, not glitching, blocked, a targeted, deliberate wall built around a version of her life she didn't want me watching. The videos Marcus forwarded showed a woman who wasn't dressed like she was thinking about a husband back home. No wedding band, obviously. She'd locked it in that jewelry box. But it was more than that. It was the way she danced with her arms up, the way she let a bartender pour tequila straight into her mouth while a small crowd cheered, the way her captions read like she was single and had always been single. One of them literally said hot girl summer starts now with 3 fire emojis. I sat on our bed at 11 at night, scrolling through a highlight reel of my wife performing a life she'd apparently been rehearsing for a while, and felt something in my chest go quiet in a way that scared me more than anger would have. The hard proof came the next afternoon, and it didn't come from her, it came from a resort. Tulum Bay Palms had an official Instagram account that posted daily content from guests, professional-looking shots meant to advertise the property, and Ashley couldn't block an account she didn't control. There she was, tagged in a cabana photo, drink in hand, laughing at something off camera, and next to her, an arm draped loosely across her shoulders, a man's arm, tanned, tattooed along the forearm, connected to a face I didn't recognize. The tag on his profile read Derek Voss, and beneath his handle, his bio described him as a content creator and lifestyle coach with 200,000 followers. Most of the grid dedicated to shirtless gym shots and captions about living free and chasing sunsets. My wife was tagged in 3 more photos on his page from that same week, always touching him, always laughing at something just outside the frame, always exactly the kind of happy she used to look like around me before we became a couple that split grocery lists and argued about whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, going through every public post Derek Voss had ever made, trying to understand who this man was and how deep this actually went. What I found wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern. Derek ran a private subscription page, invite only, where he posted what he called vacation content, footage of women he met at resorts, always married, always tagged with vague, flattering captions that never used their real names but always made the location and dates easy enough to trace if you were paying attention, if you were desperate enough to be paying attention the way I was. A tech blog I stumbled across through a forum thread had actually written about him 8 months earlier, calling his business model predatory, alleging that women who tried to cut contact after their trips ended started receiving messages asking for money to keep the footage private. The article named no victims, protected their privacy, but described the mechanism in detail, how Derek would record intimate video during these encounters without full consent, how he'd wait until the woman was home, safe, trying to rebuild her normal life, and only then would the messages start, small dollar amounts at first, framed almost gently, then escalating once he knew she was too afraid to go to the police. I read that article 4 times before the shape of the last 5 days rearranged itself into something uglier than a simple affair. The SIM card wasn't for a digital detox. It was so she could receive messages from him without it showing up on our shared cellular bill. The blocked stories weren't vanity, they were operational security, keeping the evidence away from the one person who might recognize a threat when he saw one. And the fact that she'd gone dark on me completely for 2 full days in the middle of the trip, no texts, no calls, nothing, that wasn't detox either. That was the exact window, based on the article's description of Derek's pattern, when he typically made first contact with his demands, while the woman was still on the trip, still trapped, still unable to think clearly with a stranger holding footage over her head in a foreign country. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't clean. Part of me wanted to drive to the airport and fly down there myself, and part of me, the part I'm less proud of, felt something close to relief because for the first time in days I finally understood what I was dealing with instead of guessing. My wife had cheated on me, that fact didn't change and it didn't need an asterisk. She'd made the choice to remove her ring and dance with a stranger in a cabana while I sat at home believing her lies about spa days and Wi-Fi outages. But she'd also walked into something bigger than a fling, something with teeth, and whether she realized it before it was too late or not, I no longer knew if the woman coming home in 2 days was going to be defiant or terrified, and I didn't plan to wait around to find out which. I spent the remaining 2 days of her trip doing what I do best when everything around me is falling apart. I got organized. I called a divorce attorney my coworker had used the year before and asked what I needed to protect financially before she got home. Moved half our joint savings into a new account under my name alone. Not to steal from her, just so a shared password couldn't be weaponized while I figured out what came next. I photographed every document in our fireproof box, insurance, the deed, both our passports, in case anything disappeared in the chaos I suspected was coming. I found the resort billing statement she thought she'd deleted from the shared cloud drive and saved a copy, dates and charges that lined up exactly with the article's description of a typical Derek Voss itinerary. A welcome dinner, a private boat excursion, a farewell cabana session, each one another data point confirming the pattern. I didn't confront anyone yet. I didn't message Derek, didn't message her, didn't tip off the journalist who'd written the piece. I just watched, quiet and methodical, gathering everything I could while she was still 3,000 miles away believing she had time. Her flight landed on a Sunday evening. I know because her location, which she'd forgotten was still shared with me from years earlier, blinked awake at the Austin airport at 6:42. Then again at our house 40 minutes later when she must have realized her keycard had been deactivated. I'd changed the smart lock code that afternoon, not out of cruelty, but because I needed one clean boundary between the life she'd been living in Tulum and the one she expected to walk back into without consequence. She texted me a single line around 7:15. "Where are you?" I looked at that message for a long time before I answered it. Not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, but because I understood that whatever I typed next would be the last normal sentence either of us said to each other as husband and wife. I thought about Chelsea's boyfriend forwarding me those videos. I thought about the cabana photo, her laugh aimed at a stranger's camera instead of mine. I thought about the article describing women who came home from vacation already being quietly blackmailed and too ashamed to say a word about it, and I wondered briefly, painfully, whether some small percentage of my anger should be reserved for whatever fear she might be carrying that had nothing to do with me. Then I remembered the wedding ring locked in a jewelry box so it wouldn't get in the way, and the anger one. I typed back 4 words. I know about Derek. I didn't send anything else. No explanation, no accusation spelled out, Just enough to tell her the wall she'd built around her trip had a crack in it and I'd already climbed through. Then I turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter and drove to my brother's place across town. Because whatever was about to happen, I didn't want it happening in a house with a lock I'd just changed and a woman who might be arriving in a state I couldn't predict. By the time I checked my phone again, there were 9 missed calls. Then 19. By 11 o'clock that night, the count sat at 75, along with 11 voicemails and a string of texts that swung wildly between panic and fury in a way that told me everything about what those 2 days in Tulum had actually cost her. The first messages were defensive, demanding to know what I meant, insisting nothing happened, accusing me of snooping through her phone like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Somewhere around call 30, the tone changed. She started asking whether I'd spoken to anyone else, whether I'd said anything online, whether I understood what I might have started. By the final calls, she wasn't defending herself at all anymore. She was pleading, asking me to call her back before he saw the message, saying I didn't understand what Derek was capable of, that he'd already asked her for $4,000 to keep a video private and she'd been trying to find a way to pay it quietly without me ever finding out, terrified that if he thought she'd told anyone, even her own husband, he'd release everything out of spite just to prove he could. I listened to every voicemail once, sitting in my brother's guest room with the volume low so he wouldn't hear his sister-in-law falling apart through the wall. There was no apology in any of them for the ring in the jewelry box or the highlight reel of a woman pretending to be single, only fear, and beneath the fear, something that sounded almost like relief that the secret had finally cracked open, even if it had cracked open in the worst possible direction. I understood, listening to her voice shake through that last message, that she'd spent her final night in Tulum and every day since trying to solve a problem alone that she'd created by lying to me in the first place, and that the $4,000 she was scrambling to find wasn't guilt money for our marriage. It was hush money for a stranger, and I was never supposed to know either debt existed. I didn't call her back that night. I let the calls run out, let the voicemails pile up until her phone must have finally stopped letting her leave more, and in the morning, instead of driving home, I drove to a small independent newsroom 2 hours south that had published a follow-up piece on predatory influencer blackmail schemes a few months after the original article. I didn't walk in as a victim looking for sympathy. I walked in with the resort billing statement, the cabana photos, the timeline that matched Derek's known pattern almost exactly, and I handed a reporter named Ren everything I had, asked only that my name and Ashley stay out of whatever she published, that the story focus on the mechanism, the pattern, the man, not the wreckage of one particular marriage. Ren told me she already had 2 other women's accounts on background, unable to publish because neither would go on record out of fear, and that documented financial evidence like the billing history I'd brought might finally be enough to push the story past speculation into something a platform or a prosecutor couldn't ignore. I didn't wait around to watch what happened to Derek Voss after that. 3 weeks later I saw, almost by accident, that his account had been suspended for violating platform policies around non-consensual content, and a short piece ran quoting law enforcement in 2 states as looking into similar complaints, but by then I wasn't checking his name out of anger anymore, just closing a loop I needed closed before I could stop thinking about it altogether. Ashley and I never lived together again after that Sunday night. She tried, for about a month, to frame the whole thing as something that happened to her rather than something she chose, said she'd been manipulated, said she never meant for it to go that far, and maybe some of that was even true. Maybe Derek really had been running a con sophisticated enough to catch smarter women than her. But none of that explained the bikini hidden behind paint cans, or the ring locked away so it wouldn't slow her down, or the 2 full days of silence she let me sit in while she figured out how to handle a blackmailer instead of picking up the phone to tell her husband she was in trouble. I filed for divorce 9 days after that message went unanswered 75 times, and I didn't feel triumphant signing the papers, just tired in a way that finally felt like it was pointing toward rest instead of away from it. I sold the house that fall, the one with the smart lock I changed on a Sunday evening, and moved into a smaller place across town where nobody's location pinged onto my phone without me asking for it. I still build furniture on weekends, same as always, but now I sell what I make instead of stacking it in a garage nobody else appreciates. I don't check Instagram highlight reels anymore. Don't flinch when a phone lights up on a counter. Don't wonder what a blocked story might be hiding. Some nights I still think about those 11 voicemails, the sound of a woman realizing all at once that the wall she'd built to keep 2 separate lives from touching had finally come down, and I let myself feel whatever comes up, anger, a strange flicker of pity, mostly a kind of distant calm. I didn't get an apology that meant anything. I didn't get closure the way people describe it in movies. What I got was 4 words sent into the dark, and the truth arriving anyway, whether either of us was ready for it or not. That turned out to be enough.